Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm really glad that y'all are here today. I want to start by telling you a little bit about myself. My name is Julia Chalker, and I am the District Transition Specialist from Prosper ISD. I don't know if everyone knows where Prosper is, but we are a suburb of the Dallas area, north of Frisco, Texas. And Prosper was just a sleepy little town when I moved to Frisco 25 years ago. And now it is kind of exploding like Frisco did. And we're one of the fastest growing school districts in the state. And I went to work in Prosper about 3 years ago, came from another large district that kind of went through that same boom 20 years ago. But in addition to what I do, I am a former special education teacher. My background is working with students with autism, being a life skills teacher, starting at the elementary school, but spending the most of my career at the high school level. I'm also an advocate because of my involvement in both education and my family. I feel very strongly about advocating for needs of individuals with disabilities. I'm actually a board president of REACH Resource Centers on Independent Living, and that's a really important role for me also. And another thing I want you to know about me is that I am a sibling and future guardian to this gentleman up here, Bobby. My younger brother Bobby is 51 years old and very, very important part of my life. I helped raise him in a lot of ways because my parents divorced and my sister and brother went away to college when Bobby was pretty young. So it was me and my mom and Bobby. And he's very important to me. He's probably why I went into special education, and I will be his guardian in the future. My mom is 86 years old, healthy as a horse, very, very active. But we do have that as part of the plan that I will become his guardian in the future. So that is why I do what I do. And I'm going to show you a video about Bobby. Okay, tell me a little bit about y'all. I want to know what you guys do. And let's start by how many of you are transition specialists? Raise your hand. Okay. Okay. How many of you are special education teachers? What about diagnosticians? Okay. Do we have any vocational rehabilitation folks? Texas Workforce? Okay. And who else do we have here? Well, tell me what else y'all do. Okay. Great. Well, hopefully all this information is things that can be used by you in some form or fashion. Our objectives for today is, first, we're going to talk about the need for parent training, why it's so important, the logistics, all the nuts and bolts and ways to go about setting up a training program, different topics that you might want to cover. And my wish for you is that you can leave with practical information and tools that you can use in your own district. And I'm going to give you a lot of information today, but if there's more information that you think that I can provide for you, my email address is at the back, and you are welcome to contact me, and I will share whatever I have as far as, presentations, flyers, that kind of thing. There's just no reason to recreate the wheel. So I'm hoping that you'll leave with some good tools that you'll be able to use. First of all, what does the research say? I mean, it makes sense when you think about it that, it's a given that parent educational involvement is a predictor of in-school and post-school success for students. That's a duh, right? But the research shows that is no different for students with disabilities, that is a key predictor. I came across a study, though, and this really brought it home for me. There were two parent training approaches that they used, and they were what they did is they had one group of parents were given a brochure that described local services, maybe transition brochure that talked about, I'm guessing, calling your IDD agencies and getting on the waiting list or something like that. And then there was another group that got the same brochure, plus they had an hour of small group training in addition to the brochure. Okay, not surprising. The parents that were given the brochure and the training took a post test and scored higher on it. Okay, I would expect that, right? But more significantly, and I thought this was very significant, 64% of those who actually received the training in addition to the brochure, they actually contacted a community service provider. Okay, so in my eyes, I'm thinking they called and got on those waiting lists. They took the action versus 0% who received the brochure only. And I don't know about y'all, but getting parents to actually call and do some of these things is sometimes the hardest part of my job. So I thought that study was very interesting. As far as transition programming and how does developing a training program kind of fit into this taxonomy for transition programming, as you would think, obviously it's going to involve the area of family engagement. So parent training, and when I say parent training, you could really say family training, because it may be a parent, it may be a guardian, it may be a step parent, it may be an aunt and uncle, or a grandparent. I'm going to say parent for our sake, but just know that, it could be family training. So we have that area of family engagement, and that involves family involvement, empowerment, and preparation. And that's kind of at the heart of what this parent training is all about. However, some of these other areas are definitely covered through parent training. Interagency collaboration, getting those parents to understand the roles of the different agencies and to connect to those. Student development. Several of the trainings that I do involve having parents understand what skills students need to be successful in different settings, whether it be college or a day habilitation program, that kind of thing, and understanding what supports are available. So if the parents know those things, that's going to help the students to understand that. Another is student-focused planning, and a lot of my trainings touch on self-advocacy and self-determination. So you can see that a lot of that taxonomy is covered through parent training. Okay, so who are we trying to reach as far as getting to these parents and educating them? Well, I will say that most of the topics that I'm going to talk about today are going to pertain to students with what I would call more significant needs, perhaps students that are in centralized programs, maybe a functional academics type program, active learning, life skills, that kind of thing. However, there's going to be some exceptions. Students with autism spectrum disorder, a lot of times they kind of fall between the cracks as far as what their needs are. So some of the trainings may also be good for our students that are higher functioning but have autism and may access some of the things that we're talking about. So that's an exception. Now, the other thing is I'm going to tell you about a training that I do called Preparing for Post-Secondary Education and Training. And that training is for a different group of students or parents. That's for parents of students that are likely going to access some type of post-secondary training like college, community college, trade, technical school, certificate program, that kind of thing. And that's a different group of parents that we are targeting there. The problem and why this is so important in my eyes is because how do y'all feel about living in Texas as far as special needs? It's not a good place to live, right? Well, first of all, parents don't know what they don't know. I'm always telling students that you think you know, but you don't know what you don't know because you don't know. But living in Texas, I say the dismal state of the state. We, as y'all know, are at the bottom of all the rankings for a lot of things. The Medicaid waiver program, how the length of the lists, how many individuals we have in state supported living centers, how much money is spent on each of those in those centers. We've got a really good resource here that you can use. It's called callforinclusion.org, and it has some great statistics. This map here just shows the different states and how long their waiting lists are. So that is why I think it's urgent to train these parents in a lot of the basics because of where we live. And we want them to get as informed as early as possible. I'm always putting flyers out for my different trainings, and I'm always feeling the need to, in big letters at the top, to put that it's for parents of students of all ages, because my topic might be guardianship and other legal issues, but those other legal issues are like trusts and things like that they need to know about as early as possible. A couple notes before we go any further. I wanted to note that you'll see that on my flyers and some of my the ways I publicize, I'll use the term special needs. And I just kind of wanted to preface it by saying that I've struggled with what term to use in promoting my events, whether I would put for students with disabilities, students with special needs, special education students. And I have found just over time that special needs seems to be something that is more universally accepted by parents. So that would be your choice on how you handle that. But that's what I have come up with at this point. Another note is, and as y'all know, the folks that need the information that we're giving, we know that typically they don't come to these trainings, unfortunately. A lot of times we see people at the trainings that already know the stuff, and we definitely want to change that. But just know that a lot of times the people that need to hear it are not the ones that come. So we'll talk about other ways to get that information out to them. Another thing, I wanted to clarify, why are all these trainings considered to be transition trainings? Obviously, something that's talking about, what transition is and guardianship and post-secondary education. It's easy to see how those are transition trainings, but how is training about rec and leisure or behavior? How are those transition trainings, or something about supporting siblings? Every one of those has something to do with transition, and that's why they're important to me. Behavior, we know that there's not nearly as many, or there's hardly any opportunities for individuals with significant behaviors, as far as post-secondary settings. At least where I live, there are very few day programs that will accept an individual that has behavior. Along that same line, what was the other one that I said that wasn't transition related? Behavior. Oh, rec and leisure. Having good recreation and leisure opportunities and being able to do different things in your leisure time, that's a quality of life issue. And that is involved in transition. We want our kids to have quality life, and they have to be taught and given opportunities to have skills to do rec and leisure. David, I haven't done this before, so it's like the first time. Okay, the first year, I'll go back a little bit. Came out to Prosper, and they didn't have any type of parent training. I didn't see a whole lot of information being disseminated except by word of mouth. And so the first year, obviously, you're new to a situation. You can't just go out and develop everything in 1 year. So I decided to focus on the topics that I thought were the most important or urgent to get out to parents. Things like the basics about transition. What is transition? How do you get on those? How do you get services? How do you access those interest lists? I'm almost fanatical about getting people on these interest lists. And another thing is I knew that handling the financial matters, things about trusts and accessing SSI, things like that, I knew that was something I wanted to target the first year too. So I really focused on those. Also, legal issues. I was very surprised. Well, not surprised maybe, but when I got out there, how few parents had guardianship and had an understanding that when their student turned 18, no matter how significant their disability is, they are their own guardian. And so I knew I wanted to cover that too. So the basics of transition, accessing those horrible lists, and financial and legal issues. This is a copy of my parent transition training calendar for this year, and it will have, the date and the title and a pretty, good description of what topic's going to be covered and the location. And so I would send this out at the beginning of the year as early as possible after school started. And I would make sure to look at the district calendar, make sure I'm avoiding curriculum nights and other potential conflicts. I sent it out by email through all the special education teachers and case managers. Also sent it out to diagnosticians, and also publicized it by giving it out at ARD meetings. If we had a new parent I had a student identified, we would give it to them. And I would also post it on our website and our Facebook page. I started a Facebook page for special needs resources, for Prosper ISD special needs resources. As far as some of the logistics, nuts and bolts that I considered that might help you is, as far as scheduling the trainings, the first year I did 3 trainings. I just did, like 1 in the fall and 2 in the spring. And that was plenty for my first year. Also, as far as scheduling, I did half on Wednesday and half on Thursdays, thinking that would be good because I thought it would be helpful to parents. If Wednesday didn't work, they could at least go to half of them. If Thursday didn't work, they could go to the other half. So I did find that was confusing to some, so I didn't do that the second year. But from after the first year, I moved to having trainings every month except for August and May. August is crazy getting things started, and May is like Christmas. So we would do a training every month. I picked to do 6:30 to 8. I think it gave parents plenty of time to get home from work and hopefully feed their kids. And 8 o'clock was on the cusp of being late, but they could still get their kids home at a decent hour. And just to kind of tell you how we did it, we have SIB Shops, a sibling support program, and I'll talk more about that in a little bit. But we would have SIB Shop the same night as our parent trainings every other month because they only met every other month. So one month we would have a parent training and childcare in another room. And then every other month we would have parent training, SIB Shop, and childcare in 3 different rooms. So that worked out really well. It was kind of like one-stop shopping, and that worked really well. As far as where our trainings are located, I tried to find the most centrally located location my first year, but I will say that now that Prosper is literally exploding in growth, I go where they have room to fit us. Some of the areas that we used at one school last year have been turned into classrooms. So, but I alternate between one of our elementary campuses and our admin building. So the month that we have SIB Shop, we do it at an elementary so that they have a multi-purpose room that we use for childcare, and then the gym for SIB Shop, and then the cafeteria for my training. And then the next month it would be at our administration building in the training rooms. And that's worked really well, as long as you have that on your calendar and on your flyer that goes out each month. But it really helps to have more than one area to reserve. As far as publicizing the trainings, I sent a calendar out at the beginning of the year, like I said, and posted that everywhere. But other than that, after the training each month, like the next day, I would go back and make and send out a flyer for the next month. So that could be posted on our Facebook page, and it would have more specific information about the training. It would have a link to the RSVP, and I would send it to each campus for their newsletters. It would go in the district newsletter that went out to everyone. So I think we do a pretty good job of getting the word out. And I found that one of the big keys was being able to get case managers to really understand how important it was, their role of getting it out to everyone. I found that it's not good to send it to everyone. I mean, we posted on the Facebook page and in newsletters and things like that. But as far as sending it directly to parents, I generally would have most of them sent to the students, parents of those in our centralized programs and those with autism, but not everyone, because we would find that parents would come to some of these trainings and be like, this is not appropriate. This is not anything I need to know about. So educating those case managers about discerning which parents should get each training was really important. And I know they have so many things on their plate, but I really told them and helped them to understand how I had to depend on them to discern that. As far as what kind of speakers and who did the presenting at my trainings, the district transition staff, I do a lot of the training and presenting. I have 2 other transition specialists that I work with that assist with that also. But I also would rely on getting professionals in. And let me preface this by saying that you have to be very careful to be clear that you are not endorsing any of these professionals. So I've had different people come speak. I've had, I might rotate the different firms I talk to. I just make it clear that they're there for informational purposes. I mean, obviously they get business that way because they get contact information if the parent wants to provide it. And now they have a familiar face, but you just have to be careful to make sure that folks know that you are not endorsing them. But some of the professionals that we've had as speakers are financial advisors. There's a lot of people that specialize in special needs, attorneys, counselors, the counselor that came and talked about self-care. Our adaptive PE teachers do a training every year. This year is the first year we've had the behavior specialists do one. And then, of course, our Texas Workforce Vocational Rehabilitation Counselor has helped with trainings too. So those are just some ideas. And then, of course, our parents have so much experience. So including experienced parents and parent advocates as speakers and presenters and panel members is always very valuable. I set my trainings up in different formats. I've got my traditional presentation, kind of like I'm doing with you right now. A panel discussion. We've done that for siblings, and we've also done it for parents at our Transition 101 training. Group discussion. The one time we had a group discussion, it was when we were talking about parent self-care. And it was really nice. We didn't have a huge crowd that night, but we were really able to let the parents talk about their frustrations and stresses and what helps them to deal with the day-to-day life. Workshop model. That could be, I'm going to talk a little bit about having a workshop to help parents get organized and do a binder and letter of intent, but it's kind of like a make and take type thing. That's another format you can use. Or you can have a fair, like a resource fair or a safety fair. We had a safety fair this year I'll tell you about. A resource fairs are great. We had some parents that wanted us to start a resource fair this year. And I told them, we're not there yet. We're not big enough. However, we can access our Connecting the Dots resource fair, or our neighboring district, Frisco Sage, is no longer part of that district. So their stuff is open to anyone. So, I've learned, don't start something until it can be fully supported, so that people have a good feeling about it. They're not like, oh, we went to this fair and nobody was there. But a fair is another training format that you can use. We found it very helpful to provide childcare. That is such a hard thing for a lot of our parents, to have somebody that can watch their kids so that they can actually be able to go to some of these things. So having childcare increases the opportunities that the parents are going to be able to attend. And we're talking about, a kid with a disability or their siblings. So we have a very good mix of both at our parent trainings. What we do is we do ask for a reservation for childcare, and we ask for information about ages and special needs and that kind of thing. And that's part of the RSVP. And then our volunteers, this has worked out really well, are our Ready, Set, Teach students, our students that are going into teaching, that are in the Ready, Set, Teach practicum, and they need volunteer hours, and they are awesome with our kids. This is one of our volunteers working with the kid at a sensory station at our recent safety fair. And then what I've done over time is I've collected games and crafts and Play-Doh and markers and all that stuff. And I have kind of like a kit that I use to take to the parent trainings that has everything we would need for the child care. SIP shops. I've talked a little bit about SIP shops, but I'm going to show you this video. And this video means a lot to me. My husband actually produced it, and my own child is in it.
We are world changers.
We are world changers.
We have learned what life is really about.
We like having fun and playing games and hanging out, but it is love that really matters.
Love is important.
Love changes lives.
Love changes the world.
When bad things happen, I have learned to handle it with dignity and grace.
When others get the attention I need or the thing I want, I remember to love.
Envy and jealousy are not for me.
I choose to love.
People watch me.
They wonder what it must be like.
At first, they only see the differences.
If they watch long enough, they see the love and acceptance and start to think they can do it too.
The differences fade.
The love rushes in.
World changers.
We are world changers.
You can be a world changer too.
I chase the sun, even wrote the moon for you, because you love me. I'd chase the sun for you, I'd even rope the moon for you, because you love me. Every day is a melody, a new song you have given me to sing, because you love me. This could be the song I've been waiting for. Much more, I could win 1,000 wars with you, because you love me. So now I fall back into you, with new scars and a lot of bruises, but it was worth it. You simply are the one that I've been waiting for. Can change the world. One life can change the world. One life can change the world. One life can change the world. You
Okay, that still makes me cry. That just, I think, gives everyone a good feel about sip shops, but also about how wonderful our siblings are and how they need that extra support, especially when you consider that they are a real good chance that they're going to be guardians someday. Um, so anyway, it's a recreational program for students with brothers or sisters with special needs. And what we do is we target age 8 and up, and it just gives them a chance to share about, I mean, we all know that living with somebody with special needs, there's the fun times and the tough times, and that, they have experiences, the siblings do, that other kids may not have. So they get to know others who have similar experiences. And a big thing is that you have to be 8 years old, and it's not childcare. So if you have a sib shop, that's not your childcare. Somebody has to sign up and register to do sip shop so that they're vested in it. And we've just found that to be key. And we've also found that 8 years old is important. So another thing about sib shops is something you have to be a trained facilitator for. And if you don't do sib shops, you can certainly do some other type of sibling support program. But if you will check out sib shops, it's a wonderful program, and I would be happy to talk to anyone about it, how to start one. Okay, so, and like I said, it's transition related because we're caring for those future caregivers. Okay, so after we would hold a training, I would follow up by emailing out a presentation if parents wanted to get a copy of it, and then post the presentation either on our website or another resource site, or copies of the slides, or maybe a recorded presentation using the Screencastify app, or there's some other different apps. And that way we can hopefully reach those parents that don't come to the trainings, where you can, give them a link to go to it and watch it. Another thing I recommend doing is, after you do a training, the next day, kind of take some notes and reflect on, what was good about this? What worked? What do I want to do differently next year? What questions did the parents have that I could incorporate into next year's presentation? What didn't work? What do I really need to avoid next time? And the other thing I do is I organize all my electronic copies of all the flyers, the presentations, anything having to do with that in a separate folder online. And then I still like to have things on paper. I have this notebook here this is all my trainings from last year. And if you look through it, I have sheet providers, and I have the flyer, the presentations behind it, the sign-ins, who went, that kind of thing. Okay, so now I'm going to take time and I'm going to tell you a little bit about each of the trainings that I do. I'll show you the flyers that I made, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about what the different topics that I covered were. And I'm hoping that this is something that you can use and take back and cover in some of your trainings, so you're not having to start from scratch. One training that I've done, I've actually done this for like 10 plus years because I did it in my former district. And it is a training for special education and 504 students. It's preparing for post-secondary education and training. And it's probably one of the more important things I do every year. We invite special education and 504. I do it every year at the high school campus. And now that I did it in my old district at my high school, but now that we're going to have a second high school open in my district, we might do it at one high school and invite parents to that high school. I'm not quite sure how I'll do that. Basically, we would send an email out to all 504 and SPED parents, resource setting and hire. So again, the audience is important. It's we don't want life skills parents to come to this and have to hear about college. So we would send that out, and we'd also send out a reminder the week before. And this is something that a lot of these things are things that I'll actually put on the coordinated set of activities on our transition plan, is to explore attending the preparing for post-secondary ed parent training or guardianship training, that kind of thing. This is something that I would put down for a lot of college-bound students. Or I would review the preparing for post-secondary education and training slides, and I'll put a copy of that in there. And something I've added in the last couple of years is this training includes a friend of mine comes to it, and she's a learning frameworks teacher, professor at Collin College. And she, I can talk all day about the differences between high school and college, but she would come and talk about, what's expected of students, what she has seen, and how to start preparing them now while they're in high school. And these are the things that I talked about in the training. And let me just say that the parents are always kind of shocked at this training when they realize that there's no special education in college. So I just think this is really important. But I start by talking about what are the differences between high school and college in general for everyone. When we're talking about size and independence and all those things. The next thing we talk about is what are the difference between the supports that you get now in high school as a student in special education or 504 and what supports you'll get in college. We talk a lot about disclosing your disability when you do it and when do you apply for services through disability services. Do you do it before or after your application? All that. And I find that, the parents are just thirsty for this information because they just don't know all the answers to these things. We talk about the SAT and ACT and how to apply for accommodations. I have our testing coordinator at the parent training. She can answer questions about that. We spend a lot of time talking about the TSI test and if you don't score high enough, how you end up in developmental classes and how that whole thing works. And we also, one of the most important parts to me is talking about options such as like a 2-year community college, certification programs, trade programs, things outside of traditional college that is really important for a lot of our students to consider. So I talk about that a lot. My Texas Workforce Solutions counselor generally will come to this training and introduce herself and kind of give everyone an idea of what she does. And I'll talk about useful resources. And I'm going to talk about those in a little bit, but I'll give out resources specific to college and that kind of thing. And of course, our district contacts for people. So that's the training that I do for kind of a different set of parents. As far as my trainings that I do the rest of the year, my first training I usually do is what I call Transition 101, and I've added a parent panel this year. In Transition 101, the big points that I try to get across are, number one, that it's a lifelong process. You don't just start talking about transition in high school. If you wait until high school, it's not too late. It's never too late, but it needs to be earlier. So we talk a lot about that. And then we talk about how legally it's part of the IEP and when that starts happening and that kind of thing. One of the biggest concepts I teach parents is that whole entitlement versus eligibility. I think it's so important for them to understand that they are entitled to so many things when their child is in school, but that the system totally changes when they drop off that cliff when they exit services and they have to become eligible for things and qualify and be on waiting lists. And some of the services don't even exist. So we cover that. We go over Medicaid waiver programs, just the very basics of what they are, getting on those interest lists, making sure you get confirmation, telling the big thing about, if you move, you've got to tell them or you're going to lose your place, that kind of thing. Talking about the IDD agencies in our area, it's LifePath in Denton County, MHMR, and what those agencies can do and how they might be able to help. Financial considerations, I just skim over this. For one thing, it makes me nervous to talk too much about that because I learn something new every time we have a speaker about the financial stuff. But I kind of talk basically about SSI, wills, trusts, and how, if anything, I try to get across that anything to do with special needs is going to be different. So you have to talk to professionals about these things. Another big thing in Transition 101 that I talk about is having parents understand that no matter what your child's capabilities are, those rights of that child, um, after 18, those rights transfer to that child. So we touch on guardianship and when you would start looking at that and what types of things to consider. And I usually end, or one of the things I end with is talking about, in general, at all levels, what are things that families can do to start supporting transition, beginning at a very early age. I'm talking, not doing things for them, backing off supports, not over prompting, getting them out in the community, getting them to communicate at whatever level they can, that kind of thing. You really have to start by thinking about where you want your child to be and work backwards. Another thing that we've started talking about this year, and this was based on feedback, was, transition means change. So we're talking about transition planning in general, but what about transitions from like elementary to middle school or high school to post-secondary? What are some things that can make transitions easier? And so part of my Transition 101 presentation is specific tips and techniques for dealing with the next transition in life. And we end it with about a 30-minute parent panel, and that's been a really neat experience. So this is our parent panel this year. And what we do is we ask experienced parents of students. We make sure that we ask parents of kids from different ages. So I might have some early childhood, some elementary, middle school, and high school. We definitely want some parents of some of our young adults and different varying disabilities. And what I would do is when I ask them, I always tell them, I'm going to send you a list of questions that you can be thinking about, and that always puts them at ease. And be sure, if you have a parent panel, to include parents that have dealt with some of the issues that you're going to be talking about. Make sure you have a parent that's getting services from the waiver program, maybe a parent that is on the waiting list and having to deal with getting services without that, maybe somebody that's obtained guardianship, a parent that receives SSI, that kind of thing. So not only is that going to help in making sure that questions are answered, but it's also going to be a way for these parents to meet someone that might be able to help them in the future. And these are just some sample questions that I would ask the families, the parents. I'd have them introduce themselves and tell a little bit about their family, talk about their biggest struggle, favorite success story or funny story. Try to, keep a good balance of talking about the struggles and frustrations with great things, good things. What method of coping do you utilize to deal with the stress? What are some best strategies and resources that you would like to share with someone else that they might not know? And what's something that you had known or wish you had known earlier? So those are just some sample questions. Another training that I do is financial planning for the special needs family. And that is going to be where I would have a financial person that specializes in special needs come in. And their big message is always that everything is different for a family with a special needs member. Just everything, pretty much. So they will go over, and they know much more about this than I do. The whole, Medicaid waiver programs, SSI, that whole government benefit system, and what do you need to do to make sure that you don't lose benefits, even, lose benefits in the future by doing something wrong now. They touch on estate planning, wills and trusts. I find when they come and do this presentation that when they announce that if you don't have a will in Texas, you have a will in Texas, because it's automatic that the money's going to go to who? Your kids. So if that happened, that it could, prevent them from getting benefits in the future. These parents are just shocked. And they also don't realize that they need to change their beneficiaries on their insurance policies to exclude the special needs child, so that they would not get money that could disqualify them. So Those are all real important things for them to touch on. And a big message is, I don't know about y'all, but I find parents balk at the amount of money they have to spend to do things like setting up special needs trusts and guardianship and things like that. So I think it's important for parents to know that there are costs to setting up a lot of these financial and legal items, but that the money that they could lose in future benefits or present benefits, if they do something wrong, could be so much more, and it's so much worth it in the long run. Another training we do is guardianship, supported decision making, and other legal issues. And we have an attorney come to do that. There's lots of different attorneys in the area that are happy to do this. And I have found that they don't ever hard sell. They might talk a little bit about their practice, but they're very good about talking in general and doing a teaching model. So, and that training, I would have them talk about, how do you determine if guardianship is necessary? And they've spent a lot of time, we just did this training a couple weeks ago, talking about how it's getting a lot harder. A lot of the courts are getting a lot more strict about granting guardianship. What does that whole process involve? What are some alternatives to guardianship? Supported decision-making being one of them. And then she would also, like the financial guide, she would also touch on those special needs trust and ABLE accounts. So there's some overlap between the financial one and the legal one. Another training I do is parent self-care and sibling supports. And when I think of this one about the parent self-care, I always think of the airplane thing where you're supposed to put the mask on yourself first. So if you can't breathe, you can't take care of your loved one there. So I think about that a lot. And the presenter that I would have is a professional counselor that I know. She actually was the parent to one of my former students. She has 2 sons with autism, and now that's what she does, is she works with special needs families. And the main topics that she would talk about are managing expectations, that whole self-care piece, and then also ways to develop coping skills for the rough days, because we all know that there's a lot of rough days. And when she came out, we, like I said earlier, ended up doing kind of a group discussion. It was very nice. I do the other half of the parent self-care sibling support training and share about my own experience. And so I say the speaker was a trained SibShop facilitator, adult sibling of a brother with autism, and a transition professional, and that's me. And I would speak, and I would talk about, siblings in general versus siblings with special needs brothers and sisters, because there's quite a bit of difference. And I'd also talk about unusual concerns that siblings have, some of the common feelings that they deal with. There's a lot of things specific to being a special needs sibling. Also talk about, information needs of siblings. How much do they need to know? And when. I love to spend time, probably because I'm a sibling, talking about a lot of the benefits of being a sibling, a lot of research that shows positive outcomes of individuals that have brothers and sisters with special needs. And then talking about SibShop. And how to support, what can we do as parents and family members to support those siblings? Because we know it's hard. Another training we do is on recreation and leisure. And what we do is the first half of the training is about promoting fitness and recreation. And that is done by one of our adapted PE teachers. And they would come in and talk about, what is all this inactivity? What challenges does that present? How do you choose different activities for your son or daughter? And how do you teach some of those skills? They actually would do some different exercises and routines to show us how to teach the skills and how to increase fitness and what positive outcomes come of that, some of the research. And they would have the parents actually try different activities, and they provided resources too. And then what I did for my half of it is I looked everywhere for a comprehensive listing of camps and special needs activities in my area. And everything I found was very obsolete. All the links were old, or it was programs that didn't exist anymore. So I took it upon myself to create a very comprehensive listing in my area that includes not only day programs for summer and camps, but also like, anything from like sensory friendly, this is the listing here, sensory friendly activities, parks and rec programs, swim programs. The camps were all over Texas and actually a couple out of state. Cheerleading, just all kinds of things. And what it would have kind of a description of it, who served, what their website is, and then some notes like, check their website for future dates, that kind of thing. And you'll note at the top in yellow that I put inclusion on this list should not be considered an endorsement of any kind by Prosper ISD, that this is for information purposes only. So I add that to whenever as much as I can. And I also tell parents, if you have something that would be great to add to this, let me know. And that's how this list grew. I need to check it again and make sure that it's current, because I don't know about y'all, but there's nothing more annoying than going on something and going, oh, that looks exciting, and then clicking and the link isn't current or it doesn't exist anymore. So I need to update this. But this is what I do is I print this out and give it out at the training, but then I also share the Google link, and people can access it at any time. They can't add to it. They can have me add to it, but they can access it. So anyway, when I talk about this, I talk about, like I said, area recreational programs, leagues, lessons, events, and those things. Social activities, sensory friendly. Okay, special needs safety fair. We just had our first one in November. And how that started was I had a parent come to me and say, is there any way that you could set up fingerprinting for one of your parent trainings? There was a safety fair in the district and it was just way too much. My son couldn't handle it. It was way overstimulating. There's too much noise. There were lines and that kind of thing. I said, great idea. So I went to one of our Prosper ISD police department folks and their community liaison person, and she just went nuts. She said, well, fingerprints, yeah, but let's do it all. And so we basically had a miniature safety fair that had everything that the other safety fair had. Here we have a student getting fingerprints and holding up his fingerprint picture ID, and then somebody getting to know a first responder. So we had all those different things. It was made sure it wasn't very loud. We had dancers, but the music was turned down low. They had the emergency vehicles. They had the fire engine and the police cars. And the fingerprinting was for parent records that they could take home. And then I gave information out about the Take Me Home program, which I'll talk about in a little bit. And they actually could get their picture taken, and I would take care of getting that in for them. We also had entertainment and treats to encourage them to come to it. We had free smoothies and dancers and that kind of thing. The next training I do is a kind of a workshop, a life planning binder and letter of intent workshop. And this year I'm calling it Let's Get Organized. We know that special needs parents are overwhelmed with documents and records and paperwork. And so this is to give them a time to get organized and think of ways to do things like creating a care binder to keep their important information organized. The different, what types of information do you want to maintain, and how, old do you need records to be, and how would you organize it? We also talk a lot about what a letter of intent is, and what that is, finding a way to document all the information about your child's needs, their preferences, their, idiosyncrasies, their routines. What are your desires for the future? A lot of our parents think that they're going to live forever and that, their child is going to live with them. And, they don't, I try to get them out of their comfort level and think about, what if something happened? You have to be prepared. And this letter of intent is just a way to get all that stuff down and then add to it every year. and tweak it as needed. I also tell them that the information that they're listing is a great thing to provide to future caregivers, someone at camp, somebody in a new day program, that kind of thing. But we actually start working on it at the training by doing some different brainstorming activities. So I give them strategies, tools, and templates for gathering the information. And those that RSVP'd in advance, I actually gave them a binder with dividers and a bunch of the templates and that kind of thing. So they actually, it was kind of like a make and take where they were able to leave with that. And I had a bunch left over, so I was able to give those out to parents as I met them. A new training that we just did for the first time is one on behavior. And like I said earlier, behavior is something that's a transition topic, because if we can't manage our behavior, that's really going to limit what our post-secondary opportunities are. So this was done by our behavior specialists in the district, and they're going to talk about, again, how behavior is a transition issue, how it is communication, and just talking about those very basic ABCs of behavior and how do you figure out what the function is of the behavior. And they do this in real layman's terms and understandable terms. And then they go over like 12 great strategies to help with behavior. And they talk about common situations like meltdowns in the grocery store, that kind of thing. A new training that I actually have not done yet, that is scheduled for April, that I'm very excited about, is one on advocacy. Every Voice Matters, advocating for change in Texas. So we all know that, again, Texas is not a great place to live. And I am always reaching out to parents and asking them to email and call their legislators and to do all these things. And I think that a lot of parents, and it's easy to do this, think that my one voice is not going to make a difference. And this is about how we can put our voices together and make change in Texas. So my presenters are two local parents that have been very active in advocacy. One is a parent of twin daughters. He used to be president of the ARC. And the other is a parent in my district who was very active in getting some legislation changed during our last session for medically fragile. And so they've got lots of experience. So this training, we're going to talk a lot about, how does the whole Texas service and support system work? And what are these issues that we're talking about? And y'all know what they are. They're like, what are we going to do about this waiting list? When are we going to fund more slots? Why do our attendants only get paid $8.10 an hour? And what do we need to do to get more services out in the community and people out of those state supported living situations? So those are the issues. So we'll talk about those. And then, how do you find out who to contact to advocate? And mostly the big important question is how you say advocate for change. What do you do? I don't know who to call. I don't know what to say. Do we need to all go down to Austin? That kind of thing. So we have other ways to reach out to parents too, because unfortunately a lot of them, the ones that need to hear it, often cannot get to the training. First thing I do at the beginning of the year is I do what I call my elementary tour, my worldwide elementary tour. And what I do is I schedule time to go to each elementary campus. And I'm able to do this now because we're still small enough that it's possible, but I know at some point I'm going to have to delegate some of this, but I really enjoy doing this. I go and meet with the case managers at the beginning of the year at each campus and just kind of talk about, my parent trainings, the different flyers, one about the interest lists and the Facebook page and other district resources, talk about SIB shops and give them information about that. And then I make it very clear that I love to meet with parents individually, especially those that have never heard these things, because it can be very overwhelming. So I make it a priority the first month of school, and I have to really push to get them to let me to come out because they're so overwhelmed and busy with beginning of the year things. But it's just so important that this happen early on. Also, getting them to understand how important it is to document in the R deliberations that if you tell a parent that they should get on these interest lists, that we put that down in the minutes. I don't know about y'all, but we'll have parents come to high school and they're like, I've never heard that. And I think a lot of times they just don't hear it at the full level. A little bit about the Take Me Home program. A lot of different cities have the Take Me Home program, and it's a program that unfortunately was started because of a horrible incident that happened in Florida where an individual with autism behavior was misconstrued and that person was killed. And so this is a program that different police departments have, and it's free. And you fill out a form with information about your child and attach a picture, have information about their likes and dislikes and sensitivities, things that, are they a runner? Are they an eloper? That kind of thing. And so their name can be put into the system and information about this can be pulled up. And I've actually had a student it's actually the student whose mom was the counselor that spoke at my training, who was having major meltdowns, like 6 foot tall, 250 pounds, and they had to call the police, and the police accessed his profile, and they were able to talk to him about trains, which was his special interest, and able to kind of diffuse the situation. So that's an example of how important this program is. The cities that are in my district all participate in this, but they're all separate and they don't communicate with each other. Salina is a small town that's part of my district that's also growing very quickly. And they did not do the Take Me Home program. And I made it my mission for about a year to make them do it because I'm like, the parents want it. Your parents are asking for this. So they did do that. And they actually took my feedback and put it to use. That was cool. Another thing I do is provide what I call customized resources. I've worked in areas where it was a common thing at ARD meetings to give out a big packet of information that has all kinds of resources and information, but it's resources and information for every student. I mean, there's stuff in that packet about, individuals with autism and day habilitation programs and college readiness and just a myriad of everything for every level. And I found that when you do that the person kind of checks out. It's not one size fits all. One size does not fit all. So instead of doing that, what we do is we have the folder that we give out at the ARD meeting that's very individualized. And what we go is we pull exactly what they need. So they're only getting what applies to their child. The different things you have to consider when you're pulling your stuff is it a student with an intellectual and developmental disability? They're going to have different resources than somebody that's going to go to college. Are they on the waiver program list, or do they need information about that? How old are they? Somebody that was recently identified is going to be different than somebody in our 18 plus transition program. Are they college bound? What's their career interest? So we definitely customize that. And one of the last things I wanted to show you is some of my favorite resources that I've developed and collected, in addition to some of the ones that standardly are given out. And this first thing is called What Skills Do Students with Learning Differences Need to Be Successful in College? This is something I've adapted from Landmark University, which is a school for individuals with learning differences. But I think it's a great resource to show the skills that are needed to be successful in college. And I think this is great information for any student, but the rigor that's required. Can you read this many pages a week? Are you able to write a paper with, these different requirements? Have you read your evaluation, and can you identify your eligibility and accommodations? Can you manage your time and have a system of tracking, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, it just gives you an idea of what you need to be successful in college for anyone, not just somebody with a learning difference. This is a good general flyer about what families can do to support youth. It's the whole one I talked about backing off supports, encouraging independence, getting out in the community, volunteering, that kind of thing. Another flyer, this is one that I made specific to my area, and it's information about volunteering. A lot of times I'll put on a coordinated set of activities for students to explore volunteer opportunities. Well, this volunteer sheet has a different volunteer opportunities in our area, a link to their website, and just a little bit of description like the SPCA, food banks, library, things like that. Y'all may know about these, but Texas Kate in Action has college and career planning guides. I've actually had these for a number of years, but what we do is we keep a master copy and then we make a couple copies in black and white of this, and we give it out based on a kid's college and career interest. And generally, we give these to the kids that are in resource or general ed setting most of the time because of the material in it. But it does a really good job of talking about the different careers, student organizations, and the areas of interest, things that you could be doing in advance to learn more about the career, that type of thing. Interest list flyer. I know that's not anything unusual, but that's one of my favorites because it's just so huge to me to get those parents on there. Autism Speaks, I know, is a controversial organization, but their resources are fabulous. And I especially I have copies of so many of their different toolkits, but one of my favorites is the Autism Speaks Transition Toolkit. It has everything in it from, an explanation of the different levels of employment. What is supported employment? What is competitive employment? The different types of post-secondary settings, legal issues, things you have to consider whether you need guardianship or not. There's so many wonderful things in there that I actually provide the whole toolkit when they're in 9th grade. But a lot of times I will give them sections of it, like the one about guardianship. And I've been known to white out Autism Speaks on top or to put in parentheses, not just for autism, great resource at the top. So they're not like, my kid didn't have autism, but that's such a good resource too. And then recently I started giving out this guardianship questionnaire. This is the questionnaire that Dallas County requires individuals, parents to fill out when they are seeking to apply for guardianship for their kid. And I think it's probably similar to a questionnaire that most law firms would ask you to fill out. And the reason why I give that out is that I think number one, it's something that the parents can keep and maybe work on before they apply for guardianship, but it also does a really good job at looking at the different areas that you would consider when considering guardianship, because it asks about, can your child make decisions about medical? Are they able to, talks about choosing food, just has all these different scenarios. And I just think that does a really good job at helping parents to kind of look at the importance of looking at those things. Lessons learned. A couple things I've learned is that many parents RSVP and then they don't show up. And I always get really frustrated about that, but then I have to pull myself back and remember we're talking about special needs families and who knows what they're dealing with and what happened at dinner and why they didn't get out the door, and they might have just forgotten. So that's something to keep in mind. Parents need to hear things many, many times. I know I need to hear things many times before it sinks in. So just know that repetition strengthens and confirms that a lot of times these parents need to hear things more than once. So they may need to hear it in a training. They may need to see it in a flyer. They might need to hear it again next year. Another thing is, when you have parents that have experience that are there at the trainings, hopefully they keep coming to trainings. I know in our district they do. Ask them to share their experiences because they are the experts. I'm a sibling and I'm a teacher and I'm an educator, but I'm not a parent and I haven't been through, I can talk all day about what you need to do, but I haven't had to navigate that yet myself. Also, if you do a parent panel, one thing we learned is kind of be prepared to steer the parent panel in a positive direction if you need to, just because it's not an appropriate time for venting about the school district or certain specific situations. So just use your listening skills and kind of listen and tell them that you'd be glad to talk to them later and try to kind of steer them back to what we were talking about. So as far as evaluating the effectiveness, we have not done a formal questionnaire, but we were going to do that this year to have parents give feedback on the training program. But in the past, we've gone by informal feedback. We're going to start an annual survey. And hopefully your outcome will be that you'll see increased parent participation. And, it's hard to assess this, but that you will notice that parents are accessing resources, and you're hearing more about parents that, oh yeah, I'm on the waiting list. Yes, I did that when he was, in early childhood, because there's just nothing worse than them coming to high school and finding out they're not on the list. So anyway, well, I know I've taken a lot of time. This is what I'm done, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. I hope this has been useful for you and that you're able to apply some of this in your district. If you have ideas about things to do parent trainings on, I would love to hear those. And again, I'm willing to share anything that I have. So reach out to me if you would like more information about any of these things. So thank you so much.